Because if he goes out there and starts to spread the word that mail-in ballots aren't going to work, these are going to be a real problem in the midterms for those Republicans. Plus the fact that he has no authority to do this. I mean, he tried to pass he wrote up an executive order a couple of months ago to deal with the voting, and he got shot down by 2 different federal judges. So there's really there's no path for him here, and it's sort of fascinating that all it takes is one suggestion from Putin. I mean, what were they doing talking about 2020 during these meetings? Like, he's like a cat. It's like no object permanent.
In today's video, Seder and Abby Phillip absolutely destroy CNN's MAGA panel on a heated debate over voting rights, election integrity, and Trump's dangerous rhetoric on Newsnight with Abby Phillip. Abby Phillip and Seder exposed how these attacks on mail-in ballots directly threaten seniors, the military, rural voters, and even Republicans who've relied on vote by mail for years. So let's dive in and watch how Seder and Abby Phillip shut down this MAGA panel on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
I don't know if President Trump forgot that he did this, but let me just play it. This is September 2024, about a year ago, when he said this to his own supporters.
You know that absentee ballots are about to go out in North Carolina? In other words, it's time to start thinking about let's vote. So important. This will be the most important election in the history of our country. So whether it's mail-in ballots, early voting, voting on the day, you got to get out and vote. We want to save our country. We're the only one going to save it. That other group of people, they're going to destroy our country. We can't let that happen. Go out and vote for Trump.
Mail-in ballots. He was fine with it.
Well, it was because his Republican strategists were panicking because they realized that they were going to lose without getting those mail-in ballots now. And I would imagine this time around, those same Republican strategists are also panicking because if he goes out there and starts to spread the word that mail-in ballots aren't going to work, these are going to be a real problem in the midterms for those Republicans. Plus the fact that he has no authority to do this. I mean, he tried to pass he wrote up an executive order a couple of months ago to deal with the voting, and he got shot down by 2 different federal judges. So there's really there's no path for him here, and it's sort of fascinating that all it takes is one suggestion from Putin. I mean, what were they doing talking about 2020 during these meetings? Like, he's like a cat. It's like no object permanence here.
Where were the staff to remind the president that it's actually not true what he claimed, which is that the federal government let me just read it actually. Remember, the states are merely an agent for the federal government in counting and tabulating the votes. They must do what the federal government, as represented by the President of the United States, tells them for the good of our country to do. That is not at all what the Constitution says. You know that because you're a conservative.
Abby, I agree with you. States have a huge role to play when it comes to elections. We also know that in 2020, as a result of the COVID pandemic, a lot of states went very aggressively in the direction of mail-in ballots.
Which they are entitled to do because they are in charge of the time, manner of the elections. They are in charge of that.
Even the U.S. Election Assistance Commission has studied mail-in ballots and said that there are a certain percentage, I believe like 500,000, that probably aren't ultimately delivered to their final destination. So I'd put this question to all of you. If you won the New York lottery, would you mail in your $1 million winning lotto ticket, or would you want to take it physically to the office to cash it in? I think if anybody wants to ensure that their vote is counted, the best way to do it. Well, then what about
that was a terrible analogy.
What about the Democrat Attorney General of New Jersey, who just an hour from here in Paterson, New Jersey, there was corruption and they're investigating voter fraud because there was a politician who used mail-in ballots to try to steal the election.
This debate really highlights the double standard at the heart of the right-wing talking points. Rob Bluey tries to frame mail-in voting as unreliable, but the data just doesn't back him up. Let's be real, even Trump himself voted by mail in 2020 from Florida. Same with a ton of Republican officials, from Ron DeSantis to Marco Rubio. If it's good enough for them, why suddenly frame it as fraudulent for everyone else? And the lottery analogy that Rob brought up, completely misleading. Voting is not like mailing in a scratch-off ticket. Ballots are tracked, verified with voter signatures, barcodes, and in many states, voters can check online to see if their ballot was received and counted. In fact, studies from places like Stanford and MIT have shown that mail-in ballots are just as secure as in-person voting. The Heritage Foundation itself, a conservative group, keeps a database of voter fraud cases, and out of billions of votes cast over the last 2 decades, only a handful involve mail-in ballots. We're talking fractions of a fraction of a percent. And let's not forget, mail-in ballots have historically been used more by Republican voters, especially military families, seniors, and rural communities who can't always make it to polling sites. Undermining that system actually hurts the GOP's own base, which is why, like Abby Phillip and Sam Cedar pointed out, even Trump's strategists panic when he goes too hard on this, because it's basically voter suppression of his own supporters too.
Voting is a like I like the lottery. Let's talk about why that analogy was just terrible. So like voting is a right and playing the lottery is a privilege, right? Those are two vastly different things. And the right means that you should make it free and fair. Everyone should have access to it. We should actually be trying to make voting as easy as possible so that we're more inclusive. Things like Oregon is what we should be talking about, where they have Tobias Read and automatic voter registration. That's where we should be going with this, not necessarily trying to crack down on it. Yes, we want to eliminate voter fraud, but if we want to go back to 2020, and the great irony in this, and I haven't heard either one of you all, neither one of you all have said a bad thing about Vladimir Putin tonight. Neither one of you all. And Vladimir Putin is someone who literally has killed his enemies, has killed his political opponents, has pushed them off roofs and poisoned them and all of these things. And he is the one who said that this is something you should deal with. And he went on Sean Hannity and
I
quoted
did
it.
say, by the way, that I believe the first comment I made was that he was a tyrant and shouldn't be trusted.
You're drifting from.
You know what?
You're drifting from
I
Vladimir
give you
Putin.
credit. I was
This
really
is not
talking
about
about
Vladimir Putin. This is about voter fraud.
Say
right?
something bad about Vladimir
Yes,
Putin.
that is
He's a
about
bad
voter
guy.
fraud. But let's hear
Not just
one
Patterson.
example.
I am. I'm going to give you 5. In Patterson, New Jersey is the one.
Just 5?
No, more.
That's it?
I found a bunch.
many votes have we
Sioux
got?
City, Iowa, North Carolina 9, 2018, Appalachia, Virginia 2006, Miami mayor was overturned in 97, Bridgeport, Connecticut was just overturned.
Okay.
Not every ballot.
So Joe, tell
Let me
me
finish up. Not
where
every ballot.
Tell me the degree to which mail-in voting
I'm telling you.
fraud was enough to change the result of a presidential election. Where is that?
I can't pronounce the name. In Michigan,
Of a
in Miami,
presidential election?
But not every election is about the presidential race. We also elect people at the state, federal, and local level.
But
the point I'm trying to make is,
Trump
Abby,
is making this statement
let me finish
based
the
on
point.
his
Biden win?
own experience.
Let me finish the point. Not every ballot mailed in is fraud. But it's almost always the case where you have fraudulent ballots. It's done not just by mail ballots, but paper ballots, absentee ballots. So if the president wants to secure ballot integrity in a better way, I am 100% for this. Now, you all, last segment, were so worried about the MAGA base and how they would react to troops on the ground.
Can I
gonna
just
react.
ask a
MAGA base
clarifying
is
question
thrilled
of
about
you,
this.
Joe? You said you're all for what the president wants to do, but he is saying he wants to federally, he wants the president by decree to ban mail-in voting in this entire country. Are you for that?
No idea how I was going to do that.
Okay, are you for that? Because you just said that you're for what
I'm
he
willing
wants
to
to
wait
do.
for the executive order and see if
You
it's
just
valid.
said you're for what he wants to do.
If he figures out a way to meet the requirements of the court that struck it down previously, if he figures out a way to do it, I'm for it.
He can't, though.
If he can't, then he can't.
This debate really exposes how flimsy the right-wing talking points are when it comes to mail-in voting. Joe Borelli can rattle off a handful of small fraud cases from Patterson or Miami in the 90s, but those examples never change the big picture. Study after study shows that voter fraud, especially with mail-in ballots, is virtually non-existent. The Brennan Center for Justice found the rate is somewhere between 0.0003% and 0.0025%. You're literally more likely to be struck by lightning than to commit voter fraud by mail. And here's the kicker. The very people crying fraud are the ones who use mail-in voting the most. Military families, seniors, rural voters, groups that lean Republican have relied on it for decades. Even Trump himself has voted by mail multiple times. If If it's untrustworthy, why do GOP leaders keep using it when it's convenient for them? What Abby Phillip was pushing toward is a crucial point. Voting isn't a privilege like buying a lottery ticket, it's a right. Democracies are supposed to expand access, not restrict it. States like Oregon and Colorado have had universal mail-in voting for years with higher turnout and no major fraud scandals. If anything, it makes elections more secure because ballots are barcoded, signatures are checked, and voters can track them online like a UPS package. So when Borelli tries to spin isolated cases into some grand conspiracy, it's important to zoom out. The data doesn't back him up, and at the end of the day, making voting harder isn't about security, it's about suppressing the vote. Always has been.
But it's a thing that I would hope, and I've actually supported the New York State legislature in doing this. I would write a check to South Carolina legislature.
Let me ask you a question. Are you
in
favor of when you turn 18, you're automatically registered to vote?
But you're acting like mail-in. You're acting like mail-in. Hold on. You're acting like mail-in ballots are something universal. Trump was wrong. It wasn't one country. You were wrong too. It's not dozens. It's 12. 12 countries on planet Earth have 12 have universal. 22 have other ways of getting it not universal. So that's 34. That's 15% of the countries on Earth.
Joe, we also don't have universal mail-in ballots. We don't have that.
So
the idea that, listen, it's not 12, okay, but there are over 30 countries in the world that have mail-in and ballot voting, A. And B, to your point, Sam, Donald Trump is messing with something that his voters use, okay? 24% of Republicans used mail-in ballots in the 2024 election. That is a little bit down from 2020 when there was a pandemic, but it just goes to show that you then take those voters, some of them are in the villages in Florida, they're in Utah where they automatically send mail-in ballots to every registered voter.
Right.
You're taking those Republican voters and you're saying to them, we're going to make it harder for you to vote. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Putin said it was a good idea. Like also, if you're going to get away with eliminate all mail-in voting, then what happens to the individuals who in New York State are on the permanent absentee list? Those who are disabled, those who are senior citizens who can't get to the poll. So are disabled people then totally disenfranchised if they're unable to get to the polls? Is that what the president really wants to do? I mean, this is bad for him politically, but it is bad for democracy, and the just absurdity that it came from a meeting with Putin just adds insult to injury.
We can do this right. The problems of mail-in voting.
We can do this for the military as well.
But he said it.
The military votes mail-in ballots.
Yes, that's right.
The military votes
in the last iteration of this, it wasn't.
Well, I don't understand. If it's not secure for citizens, why isn't it not secure for the military?
Again, I'm not saying anyone can make an election completely secure from any fraud. I'm just saying that in many instances, which I laid out earlier, just the top 10 I could find, right? The universal method was through paper ballots, whether it's absentees or whether it's mail-in ballots.
So now you want to get rid of all.
Don't put words in my mouth. We do have to hit pause on this
I'm
conversation.
just
We're going to continue this after a quick break. We'll be right back.
This whole debate really highlights how shaky the right-wing arguments are when it comes to mail-in voting. The idea that it's somehow unsafe falls apart the second you remember that the US military has relied on mail-in ballots since the Civil War. If we can trust deployed service members to cast their votes this way, literally from war zones, why would it suddenly be too risky for seniors, disabled voters, or people living hours away from polling places? And let's be clear, the numbers don't lie. Roughly a quarter of Republican voters used mail-in ballots in 2024, just like Abby Phillip pointed out. Utah, a deep red state, has universal vote by mail and has for years. They've reported zero significant fraud. In fact, across the entire country, multiple bipartisan studies have found voter fraud rates so low they're statistically irrelevant. We're talking about a fraction of a percent. What's really going on here is simple. Restricting mail-in voting doesn't stop fraud, it stops turnout. And who's most affected? Seniors, people with disabilities, rural communities, often the very voters Republicans claim to champion. On top of that, making this push right after a meeting where Putin suggested it makes the whole thing even more disturbing. We already know Russian disinformation campaigns targeted US elections before. Why on earth would anyone in American politics take their cues from a dictator who murders journalists and rigs his own elections? Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.